Ah, I got 2 Luminous ink just now. Let's go. Oh, Luminous ink. That's 7 Luminous ink. Oh, I got 2 Luminous ink. And that is about... Okay. It's not too bad. I don't know, guys. Oh god, we're gonna get crucified for this.
Kind of annoying that they locked this cool new feature behind such a tedious flaw.
Is it tedious though? I mean, I'm chilling.
I hate farming.
You hate farming?
I do.
But why?
Because it's not stimulating?
It's not stimulating, but numbers pop up every time you press E. So I'm making this video not to brag about my alleged streamer RNG in regards to Luminous ink, but to discuss a few things surrounding this material you need to engage with the newest system in the Elder Scrolls Online. To summarize, Scribing is the biggest feature of ESO's latest expansion, the Gold Road chapter. Indeed, arguably the most ambitious system in the MMO's 10-year history. And it's essentially spellcrafting, or at least ESO's take on spellcrafting. It's something a lot of ESO players have been asking for since QuakeCon 2014, when the skeleton of it was showcased by developers, although that never came to fruition post-launch, probably due to various factors. Fast forward over a decade later, we finally have Scribing, and just like with previous expansion systems such as Antiquities, Jewelry Crafting, Tales of Tribute, Companions, and so on, there was an expected degree of grinding players would have to undertake in order to both fully unlock the system itself and to fully engage with it, as Scribing touts over 4,000 possible ability and spell combinations each player can make or theorycraft with for their playstyles and characters. The 3 components to unlocking and engaging with Scribing as a system are as follows. First, you have to complete the Scribing questline on at least one character, which can take anywhere between 3 to 5 hours on average. Doing the full questline gives you 12 guaranteed Luminous inks and account-wide bonuses and buffs in regards to being able to get scripts and Luminous inks on any character in the form of luminaries, which means you don't have to do the full questline on every single one of up to 19 other characters, and instead only do the introductory quest on them, which is pretty great. And of course, questing is subjective. Personally, I found the questing not too bad compared to previous systems. The second component is to unlock scripts or effects, which are the effects themselves, and they act sort of like motif styles or recipes that each character can learn, and they can be purchased or grinded from a variety of sources including merchants, daily quests, coffers, and so on. Surprisingly, it doesn't seem or feel like a lot of people have too many complaints here either about the access to scripts. In fact, some players have reported being pleasantly surprised that they are now doing activities they never would have done and enjoying them for getting the scripts. The third component is of course the Luminous inks, which a great number of players do have issues with. Luminous inks are required to create or modify the grimoire abilities or the skills you can scribe or spellcraft. Basically, you need 1 Luminous ink to make an ability with 1 effect or script, but who would do that? That's just boring really, so you basically need 3 Luminous inks to make a skill with 3 effects, and of course if you want to change just 1 effect on that skill, it costs 1 ink, and if you want to change all 3 effects, it costs 3 inks. So hopefully, you understand the system here at this point, because now the main issue people have is with the rarity or cost of the Luminous inks they need to scribe. There are effectively 3 ways to get Luminous ink. First way is to kill, loot, steal, fish, or harvest for Luminous ink. The second way is to do the entire questline for the 12 guaranteed Luminous inks per character. The third way is to buy Luminous inks from other players who farm it the first or second way. This sounds all well and good on paper, but an ESO forum thread titled "Where's the Ink?" had 11 pages of people complaining and discussing what seemed to be an abysmal drop rate, while some people who had potentially better fortunes, like Andy S., shrugged and farmed away. The original poster says, "The ink drop rate off mobs and resources is awful. I tried gathering for an hour and got 0 ink. I need 3 ink to make a skill. Why is the drop rate so bad?" Another post says, "Drop rate from nodes was 0.6% for me in 1,000 pulls on PTS. Drop rate from enemies at 0.2%. Another poster said, "I spent an hour exploring around Reaper's March, picking up every gathering node and defeating every enemy I found to get 3 ink at most. I really do not wish to be spending an entire hour doing things like this just to be able to make 1 whole new skill, especially when I have 19 other characters I wish to play with this one." Yet another person accounted that, "I harvested every node on my way during questing, got 2 inks in 18 to 20 hours of gameplay. By that time, I got 2700 rough ruby ash, 2200 rubedite ore, 900 silk, and tons of runes and alchemy stuff, and similar posts keep going on as well. Some players even believe that the drop rate could be bugged, with some theories suggesting characters that did not do the entire questline had lower chances of getting Luminous ink. Others even think there's a conspiracy in which many players are opting to only loot Luminous inks from nodes. At this point, community manager Kevin had to step in and say, "Checked in with the dev team on this. Yes, all characters do have an equal chance to acquire ink. The base drop rate is count-wide. However, an important caveat, the drop quantity can be impacted per character if plentiful harvest CP is invested in on a specific character." So at this point, I was curious because while it's great to read anecdotes and other people's feedback, I wanted to see for myself how bad or good the drop rates were. So I spent over 3 hours, which I assume is a good average playtime for an average casual player on a weekday, just farming for Luminous inks. I tried fishing, I tried killing, I tried Imperial City, I tried harvesting multiple overland zones including Hugh's Bane, the West Weald, and the PvE zone of Cyrodiil. I even tried a few hundred surveys. To clarify, I don't think my drop rates really matter here too much for others on a mathematical level, as first, the drop rate is completely random, meaning even if I picked up 9 Luminous inks in 40 minutes, I may get 1 or 5 or 0 Luminous inks in the next 2 hours. Second, a few hours is such a small pool of data, and I just really wanted the feeling of it. So what I came away with was that killing things for Luminous ink isn't really efficient at all compared to harvesting nodes, as the plentiful harvest champion points slottable can double Luminous ink to 2 on the harvestable nodes compared to just 1 if you find it on a dead body. Or if you mainly care more about Telvar and see Luminous inks as a bonus, you can go to IC. Fishing is also not that time or gold efficient either, since you can now get Perfect Row pretty cheap from other players or from Infinite Archive, and you can harvest like 5 nodes per every fish you pull. And lastly, survey resources do not yield any Luminous ink, which I think was a miss on the game's part, because Craglorn survey resources can yield Nerncrux, so why not Luminous ink? And so I came away with a lot of thoughts about this. First, I try to look at this from the developer and system perspective. It's well known that players, even in ESO, far outstrip developer expectations on a variety of levels, from min-maxing to outpacing a new system. So maybe there were some thoughts on gaining access to the system so that people didn't get bored a few weeks after the patch launched. There's also the added benefit of gaining player metrics in terms of activity in game, which is obvious, and hey, maybe people need something to grind like in other MMOs, and I'm sure there are other MMO players looking at the complaints from ESO and thinking, why are ESO players so soft? Why not just grind these materials out or just grind the gold out to pay other players? Which sure, I think there's an aspect of that which could be valid. Maybe the drop rate of Luminous inks were also looked at from the in-game economical standpoint, where unlike the Antiquity system, you could bring in players who are not interested in engaging with the Scribing system, but could act on this financially, which I felt was definitely something ESO missed out on with the Antiquity system, because not everyone wants to go digging in the dirt for mythics or leads or furnishings or whatever, but there are players who would have been thrilled to do it as a service for those other players. Of course, with Luminous inks being a new material and people still trying to farm them, prices would be ludicrous for the average player at the beginning, even against the backdrop of an in-game economy which is mostly seeing a great decline in prices of basically everything across the entire market, which is great, especially for a hyperinflated economy like we see on PC North America. So, I could see perhaps why the drop rates for Luminous inks are like this, but on the other hand, I think the current drop rates for Luminous ink are a bit too low when I consider other things. First, I have an issue with the fact that the most efficient method of farming Luminous inks seems to be from harvesting nodes, especially when killing things objectively takes more effort or at least physical movement on part of the player, even in overland areas. That in itself doesn't really feel rewarding and not very mentally stimulating for a bulk of players who want to actually play the game rather than press a button per node. I'm not saying that you shouldn't be rewarded for also harvesting for hours, because that's also a ridiculous notion, but I think there could be a fine balance here. Next, I think when we consider the fact that, at least to me, the fun or enjoyment of scribing is in the system itself, where we can theorycraft or play around with over 4,000 possible combinations of spells and abilities, but gatekeeping this entire system with rare materials behind even more demanded time in the form of farming or farming gold is antithetical to the very system itself. I don't see a system where people are pushed to installing the public test server just to theorycraft or min-max so they don't waste materials on the live server as a super friendly system. Again, there could be a fine balance here between giving too many luminous inks or giving too little in terms of drop rates. If I were a developer, my greatest fear wouldn't be that people don't like scribing as it is, or people don't like farming, because those two things are easily resolved, but it would be that people ultimately disengage from the system after burning out and not using it at all, especially given the increasing competition between a person's time and other sources of entertainment at present. Another thing to consider is that in theory, even if a player was to only focus on one character with all the scripts with all of their available luminous inks, respeccing scribable skills from PvE to PvP or PvP to PvE, something which the developers have greatly improved on in terms of quality of life over the years, especially with the armory system, is also going to be a hassle. I'm not saying all this because I don't like scribing. I actually really do. I think it's a great system for what it's able to do in the beginning stage of its life. But I would love to see a slightly adjusted drop rate on other sources besides harvesting nodes so that there are more efficient options for players of all levels and interests. And going back to the age-old discussion of a potential reward structure in the Elder Scrolls Online, perhaps like the proposed Dragon Room or other rare materials, luminous inks could also be offered as incentives for players doing content or achievements that they never would have considered doing and actually found fun, much like how people farming scripts right now have done so, because you never know. People might find fun in PvP, or a trial, or doing a random veteran dungeon instead of random normal if they are provided an incentive. So that's it. Those are my thoughts. These are my findings from trying out the farming of luminous inks. I understand the complaints, and I understand the other valid points as well from people who are okay with the current drop rates, but at the end of the day, I don't think adjusting the drop rates for different sources of luminous ink would be the greatest harm in the world for ESO.